The Party by Pam Munoz Ryan. It didn't take me long to figure out that I wasn't invited to the party. I got off the bus and saw my friends huddled under the tree where we all stood every morning before the first bell. There were 6 of us: Teresa, Becky, Barbara, Carol, Kim, and me. I can't even say that we were close friends. We had come from different elementary schools and never fit in with the predictable middle school jocks, pops, or nerds. We were flotsam and jetsam that washed under a tree in front of the library and became an entity by default and by simply standing together. The circle seemed tighter as I approached. The flittering of small white envelopes being hastily stuffed into backpacks and binders gave it away. I knew, as well as the entire universe, that Bridget's party was this weekend. Bridget was one of the pops, the popular ones, and the antithesis of me. She was thin and wore clothes that looked like they came straight from the pages of magazines. She had that hair, red and cut into a perfect page, smoothed into a bowl around her face, and every shade of shoes to match even her wildest outfits. She had a select group of followers who squealed and hugged each other between every class, as if they hadn't seen each other in years. We all wanted to be like her or them, and being invited to her party meant elevation in the school pecking order. To not be invited meant standing in stagnant water. My stomach churned, and I hoped that Bridget was still holding an envelope with my name on it to be delivered later, but my friends' shuffling feet and furtive glances guaranteed my fate. Their 2 eager hellos told me that everyone already knew who was invited and who wasn't. "Hi," I responded, but that one word already sounded hollow with disappointment. Becky, always the diffuser of uncomfortable moments, said, "Hey, did you get all the algebra homework done?" "Everything but the last problem," I mumbled. "Here, want to see the answer?" Eagerly, maybe out of guilt, she gratuitously flipped open her binder before I could tell her it didn't matter. I pretended to be interested in her calculations, but my head swam with that sinking feeling that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't worthy. Thankfully, the bell rang and I hurried toward English. When I passed the cafeteria, the impending lunch smells followed me, and I felt nauseous by the time I reached class. But I knew it wasn't from the aroma of creamed turkey and overcooked green beans. I couldn't concentrate on the short story we were supposed to be reading in class, but I had no trouble attending to the faux wood grain on my desk and wondering if I could dissolve into it and disappear. Why hadn't she invited me? My feet were too big? No. Maybe my face was broken out? Who wants someone with acne at her party? Why did she invite every person in my group except me? I tried to think of any interactions I'd had with Bridget recently. A few days earlier, we'd been partners during a 6th period project. I was intent on getting the project done and impressing her with the grade we could get, and she was intent on looking at teen magazines. She barely spoke to me except to say, "You're so serious, you know. You should smile more." By the end of 2nd period, I had overheard all the details about the party. They were going bowling. It was a sleepover. There was going to be a scavenger hunt. They were renting scary movies and were going to stay up all night. Each time someone mentioned the party, I smiled weakly and nodded. During 3rd period, Meredith, one of the drama club girls who wasn't invited and didn't care, asked me if I was going to Bridget's party. Instead of saying no, I found myself repeating tidbits that I had heard earlier. "Her dad is taking everyone to IHOP for breakfast. They're taking 2 big vans so everyone will fit," I said with authority, as if I were going to. Meredith said, "I wish she'd invited me so I could tell her no. She is such a brat, and all that phony hugging, what's that all about anyway?" Where did Meredith get her confidence, I wondered. At lunch, I sat with my group at our usual table, and they politely avoided the subject. When Kim got up to take her tray, she said, "I'm going to shopping tomorrow after school. Anybody want to come?" But I knew what they would be shopping for, so I said, "I can't, I'm busy." Becky hung behind and walked with me to dump our trays. I heard Bridget could only invite so many people. Whatever, I said. See you later. I didn't look at Becky. I couldn't look at her because if I saw any pity or kindness in her eyes, I'd start crying. So I pretended to look for something seemingly important in my backpack until she left. Maybe she didn't invite me because of my hair. It's so long and stringy. Maybe it's my coat. It is pretty ugly compared to some of the other girls' coats. I should have bought another color. But what does it really matter? None of my clothes match. I'm way too tall, but there isn't anything I can do about that. And she couldn't not invite someone to a party because they were too tall, could she? Maybe I should smile and hug more. But I just can't get into hugging people unless I know them really well. Probably if I'd smile more, I would have been invited. I hated Bridget. I hated her more for having the ability to make my life miserable. I wanted to go home. I felt sick. As I changed classes, I averted my eyes from everyone I knew so I wouldn't have to smile, so I wouldn't have to pretend that I was likable. By fifth period, the news was out. 3 girls that had been invited to the party couldn't go because of the overnight band trip. They rushed up to Bridget to tell her the sad news, and one of them cried, proving what a good friend she was and how much she wanted to go. They gave back their invitations. I passed the crier between classes and saw her injured yet superior look. After all, she had been invited. Then the whispers began, like tiny wisps of drifting clouds about who might be chosen in their places. I walked to 6th period trailing behind Bridget, hanging back and watching hopeful faces laughing a little too loudly as they passed her. I counted 9 girls who smiled and said hello to her on the short walk between classes. They might as well have been saying, "Choose me, choose me." After school, Becky found me in the bus lines. Breathlessly, she said, "Bridget asked Barbara at lunch who else she should invite, and Barbara said you. And Kim just told me that she just heard Bridget say she was going to maybe invite you to her party. Call me, okay?" She held up both hands with fingers crossed, then hurried toward her bus. There was still a chance. But what did Becky mean when she'd said Bridget was maybe going to invite me? Was there a condition? Over all the heads, I could see the red hair bobbing toward the bus lines. Then stopping, I heard Bridget laughing. She moved to another group, and there was another little burst of laughter. Kids began crunching forward to board the bus. So what if I didn't go to the party? I'm still me, whether I go or not, and it's just for one night, so what's the big deal? My thoughts were spinning. Bridget headed toward my line, weaving through the crowd, and it did seem as if she was headed toward me. I pretended not to notice and looked straight ahead at the bus. I felt a hand on my arm. I turned my head. Bridget held out an invitation. "Will you come to my party?" I looked at the small envelope, relishing the moment, but my mind was a jumble. Now she wanted me to come to her party, but she hadn't wanted me in the beginning. I'm an afterthought. I am not on the A-list. I'm just filling a space so the vans will be full. I need to smile more. Take it, I thought. You know you want to go. Take it. The crowd was moving me now, and I was only a few feet from the bus steps. Bridget moved with me as I inched forward, still offering the invitation. I looked at the envelope. The original name had been scribbled out, but my name hadn't even been written in its place. If I didn't take it, I was sure that it would go to someone else. I put my foot on the first step of the bus, then looked at her. I hesitated. Someone behind me yelled, "Get on the bus!" I took a deep breath and gave her my answer. And then I smiled. The Day I Followed by Eric Looper. "Only one last test and you're in the club," I said to Sam, who was trotting alongside me like a puppy eager for a treat. I could feel excitement radiate off him as we walked to the far side of Henshaw Park. Sam fiddled with the zipper of his hoodie. "What do I have to do?" he asked. "It's easy," I said, not quite sure what I had in store for him. Ricky Perillo had told Sam that there was a series of tests you had to pass in order to get in with the group of kids who hung out at the park, and Sam had been begging all afternoon. The least we could do was give him something to do. I glanced back at the bench near the swings. The other neighborhood kids, Ricky, Mark, the twins, Glenn, Gary, and a few guys I didn't know, urged me on with grins and fist pumps. It had been only a few days since Ricky had pegged me in the back of the head with a baseball, and I figured I'd rather be on the dealing side of things for a change. Anyhow, Sam could take it. He'd been putting up with this sort of stuff long before I moved to town. At least that's what I'd heard. It started off simple. Sprint a few laps around the park. Go buy us gum at the candy store. Hang upside down from the monkey bars for 5 minutes. Anything we could think of to amuse ourselves. On all accounts, Sam eagerly did what we told him to do. And on all accounts, I was glad it wasn't me. The last test is on the tennis courts, I said. You sure every one of you had to do all of these things? Sam asked skeptically. Of course, I lied. I unlatched the heavy gate and led Sam to the net. My mind scrambled to think of something that would give the other kids a good laugh. I'm going to blindfold you, and you have to find your way out. I figured watching Sam bumble around the green concrete would be pretty funny. Maybe he'd even trip over the net. That's lame, he said. I told you it was easy. Sam smiled. His crooked teeth spread his lips apart. His wavy hair stuck to his forehead in sweaty swirls. He was such an easy target, so odd-looking, so gullible. It was no wonder most of the 5th graders picked on the kid. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was only a pang. The rest of me felt relieved it wasn't me going through this fake initiation. What are you going to blindfold me with? Sam asked. I don't know. I patted my pockets. Do you have anything? I could put my hoodie on backward, he offered. You know, so the hood covers my face. Great idea. Sam pulled his arms out of the sleeves and turned his sweatshirt around. Then he flipped his hood up over his face. I'm totally blind, he joked as he flailed his arms around dramatically. I could hear the smile in his voice. The other guys cheered from across the park. Something fluttered in my chest. Was it fear? Excitement? Maybe it was something else. What I knew was that was the first time I'd felt in control in a while. I had been struggling for friends ever since I moved here in 3rd grade. Amusing the kids at the park, getting on their good side, seemed an excellent way to do it. All right, I said, I'll just turn you around a few times. Sam held out his arms so I could spin him more easily. I glanced at the other kids. Ricky gave me a thumbs up. When I figured Sam was dizzy enough, I let him go. He spun around a few extra times for good measure. By the time I slipped out of the tennis court, Sam was staggering about, groping for anything to help him regain his bearings. He stumbled to the edge of the court and leaned a shoulder against the fence. For a moment, I was both afraid and amused that he might throw up inside his own hood. Probably just playing it up to make us laugh, I thought. That's when Mark pushed past me onto the court and held Sam against the fence. Ricky pulled the strings of Sam's hoodie through the bars and yanked him tight so Sam's head was snug against the metal. Then he tied a triple knot. Sam cried out, but Marky and Ricky dashed away. I looked for Glenn and Gary, but the twins were already gone, having hoisted Sam's new 10-speed high into the branches of a nearby tree. Everyone else was running too. "Let's go!" someone called to me. I watched Sam struggle to loosen the drawstrings of his sweatshirt. His skinny legs kicked at the air. His fingers clawed at the back of his head. "Someone untie me!" he shouted between sobs. "I can't reach the knot through the fence." I hesitated. Even with my short nails, I knew I could get the knot loose. I heard the laughter fade toward Ricky's house. "Come on, Looper!" someone else yelled. "Follow us!" I followed. The cracked sidewalk passed easily under my feet. I knew the way to Ricky's. It was backed up to the train tracks on Hawthorne Avenue. I passed it every day on my way home from school, saw them eating ice pops on the front stoop out of the corner of my eye. I never dared to look up after one time Mark chucked his blue raspberry freezy at me. Maybe we'll have ice pops when we get there. Maybe those guys will let me hang out with them on the front stoop. A heavy lump rose in my chest. I slowed. Maybe they won't pick on me anymore. I stopped. I heard Sam's muffled cries behind me. I turned around and headed back to the park. Even with my short nails, I knew I could get the knot loose.